Let's talk about academia.
Yes, let's talk about it because I started back to school this week.
And how did that go? What does it mean you started back to school?
So, we have a week of like teacher training stuff. So, I've been going to meetings and working in my classroom and doing all the things that teachers do before the kids actually come back.
So you were a high school teacher. Let's talk
Yes.
about that because I feel that in this country, teachers are highly valued and lifted up above. And yet at the same time, the reality is teachers don't really get that much credit. And it's kind of like teachers get thrown under the bus. You work really hard, long hours, lots of kids, paid,
Yeah.
decently well. But like
Yeah.
after it comes down to it, like people, do they really feel that great about what teachers do?
Right. Well, I think it's because people maybe don't understand everything that goes into teaching and teachers obviously are in education because they want to change lives, they want to make a difference. And that's very inspiring and motivating. And every year, I think teachers are excited to get back with their kids. And then the reality of things just kind of starts to set in. Like a bunch of the meetings that we have every year are how do you meet your kids who are considered special populations, like the ones who have special needs, the ones who are gifted and talented and need to be really challenged. And so, of course, being a teacher, being someone who wants to do those things, you just kind of sit there sometimes thinking, how do I do this for every kid in my classroom when, I need to do this kind of lesson for this kid, but sitting across the aisle is another kid who needs this kind of lesson. And
Oh,
it can
would
be
you stop
overwhelming.
complaining? You're being a typical teacher. The year hasn't even started yet. You're
I
complaining and
know.
whining.
No.
This is why teachers aren't highly regarded in this country.
Right, right. Because all we do is whine. So I know, big complainers. But I do think that, obviously I want to do great things this year. I'm super, super excited about my content because I'm teaching hospitality, which has been a passion of mine for a while to really bring that career and technical education back into the schools. And so to be able to participate in that. And then I also teach a business English class. I'm doing English, which I've done for years, but this year and last year the focus has been on helping kids read and write for business. So I love it.
Okay, so as a Christian, you're in the high school setting, I'm in the university setting, and we're teaching kids. A lot of the times it feels like we're teaching the same kids because they kind of have the same maturity
There-
levels. But
yes.
how do we, as people who want to follow Jesus and honor what Christ and the Lord has called us to do, how do we live that out in the setting of academia in high school and college?
Well, I think it's a little bit different for me in high school just because of, the care that you have to take in what you can and cannot say with it being a public education system.
What are you
So
saying? I
it's
can
not
say whatever I want at the university level?
I think you have more freedom. I don't
Yeah,
know,
I'd agree
maybe
with
I'm
that.
wrong.
I
But yeah,
No, no,
okay.
I'd agree with that. Go, yeah.
Okay.
So you feel a little bit
So
more restricted at the high school.
yeah, and so it's not like I can just come straight out and say, "I love Jesus and, he's your savior," like that those words can't come out of my mouth. But what I can do is love my kids, and what I
Mm.
can do is show them, the compassion that Christ has for everyone through my own actions and the way that I respond to them and the things that they're going through.
Yeah, and I feel the same way because I teach at A&M. I'm a graduate student finishing up my PhD, and the trade-off is I teach, which is fantastic. It's absolutely what I love to do. I love teaching. I started off teaching high school, and now I'm at A&M. And I would say that I have more freedom for people to understand where I get my joy and my purpose and things like that from because I mean my last name is Christ Joy. So I kind of start out the
Yeah.
class with my name and they all kind of
Mhm.
get the idea. The other thing about it is my research or what I'm studying and focusing on deals with churches and how churches can live out their faith and be resilient. And so I can talk about my research in the university setting, even in my classrooms. I don't dive into, hey guys, Jesus is my savior, and who in
Right, me
here
either.
who in here would like to talk about that? I can't go that far, but I'm with you. I think one of the greatest ways that we can open the door and be servants that the Lord has called us to is simply to love the kids, to treat them with respect, and that's what I do. when we start our class, like commonly I'm teaching public speaking or communication for technical professions, or I'm also teaching leadership over at the Corps of Cadets. It's like it's awkward and there's a lot of dynamic in the classroom that's reserved. And so I start off by telling people, hey, this is our class. We are working together. I know some things, hopefully, because I'm the instructor, but I know you know some things too. So we're going to learn together. And I'm not afraid to be vulnerable. I'm not afraid to say, man, I messed this up. I did this. Hey, I did this really dumb thing. I want you guys to know about it. And that just showcases, hey, we're all on the same page. And through that, I think I start to show the light of Christ. And I know that you do that too.
Right. And I feel like just listening to you talk about how you are in the classroom, you've really impacted the way I was in the classroom, because I went into teaching feeling like I was supposed to be reserved. I was supposed to be the authority on everything. And it was my job to impart my learning upon my kids. And obviously, that is a very old school way of thinking for education. Now, granted, I started 28 years ago, so things have changed quite a bit since I first started, and I was elementary level. So there's a whole different dynamic. But I remember when you started teaching high school and you were talking about how open you were with the kids and how you admitted your mistakes, and you didn't have to have that I'm in charge mentality, and you develop these really great relationships with your kids. And it really helped me look at myself and be like, the most important thing I want to do is love these kids, but the way I'm approaching them is actually limiting my ability to do that. And so you really changed me as an educator to be like, get to know your kids, admit when you make a mistake, admit when you don't know something, and it's actually empowering to do that.
It's really hard though, because it's a give and take. Let's talk about the high school level. And it applies at the university level too, because you're like, hey guys, we're all on the same page. We're together. I make mistakes and all that. That also kind of opens the door for them to be like, hey, you gave me this grade and I think you should change it. And automatically when I have that type of approach from a student, I'm like anybody else. I want to maintain my authority as the adult, as the expert instructor. And I get like, I don't know what it's called, my dander up. And I'm like, "Ugh," like, how dare you question my authority? You know, but then I have to like relax and be like, okay, man, this is going to work out a lot better. This is a conversation that I'm having inside my head. This is going to work out a lot better if you go something like, okay, well, what's the deal? What did you think? You know, and I make them a friend and we have a conversation and they're like, well, I just felt like I did really good on this speech. I'm like, all right, okay, let's take a look at it because I don't always get everything right. And it's very difficult for me to go through that process because, again, I want to be like, hey, just shut your mouth and like you take the
Right.
grade that I give you.
Right.
I definitely
Have
feel
you
that.
ever have you ever had to change a grade? Because I
Yeah,
have.
I mean,
Yeah.
yeah, no,
Yeah.
I have. Because we'll sit down and we'll rewatch the recorded speech for not the whole thing, but a couple of moments, and I'll say, okay, so here's some things that I was thinking about. Like, for example, you said or like a lot more, but I can tell that you really improved on this. And just having that conversation with the student really shows that you care, and it's a lot better than just saying, hey, you do whatever I tell you. But yeah, I'm with you. I've definitely had to change a grade where I've been like, I feel like I was too harsh on you in this area because you really do verbalize this passage really well, and this is where I think I was just it's too hard on it. So that's
Right.
one of the ways that I feel like it really makes a team of people on the same level. And yeah, it's a lot harder work. It's a lot harder work because I think in the university setting, especially, there's definitely the thought process of the professor or the instructor is in charge and you don't question it and there's nothing you can do. And I see that
Right.
happening a lot of the times, but it's so much easier if you make a partnership with the body of students.
Right. I agree with that. And I not grading speeches like you do, but I have essays that I have to grade. And sometimes there's a whole bunch that I'm trying to get graded at once, and I can miss things. And when a student comes and says, can you explain this grade? And we talk through it, and they're like, well, but I did that right here. Here's where I brought that piece in, and I can say, you know what, you're right. And I've actually had to tell them, look, I'm sorry. I was
Yeah.
grading a whole bunch at a time. I missed that. And but I also think when you have that vulnerability, um, it it really helps establish that relationship more because you're willing to say, you know what, you were right, and I'm going to make the correction. So
I'm laughing because I'm with you on that. And I remember a situation last semester where I was teaching, it was communication for technical professions, and I had created an assignment, which a lot of the times I will create things with the flow of the class. I keep some things fluid, which makes the class very dynamic, and it hits students with what they need at the right moment. At the same time, there's students out there that's difficult for them because they really need structure so they can plan, organize, and process in their head. And I understand that, but it's also frustrating too because maybe I'll come up with an assignment as we're doing things. I'm like, oh yeah, you know what? Let's do this because I think it'd be really helpful. And then I'll have a student like raise their hand like, Mr. Christjoy, uh, where's the rubric for this? I'm like,
Yeah.
my immediate response is like, there is no rubric. You just do it because I told you to. Okay.
Yeah.
And I have to
Yeah.
settle down. I'm like, okay. The student is right. It would be helpful. That's a piece of communication. That's a way I can serve them and say, here's some parameters of the assignment. Like if you don't know what a rubric is, a rubric breaks down exactly what the expectations are and what kind of the grading scheme would be. It's really annoying to create as an instructor because it's like, I don't have time for that. This is a fluid class. It's
It's a
time to,
way it's a way to put a quantitative grade on a qualitative work.
yeah.
Like yes, like you're basically saying you wrote or you spoke and here's the things that you did so that you get this higher grade. But it's so subjective.
Yes.
And which makes it more challenging because I can feel like through different processes, like when I first start grading to where I end grading, I worry that I'm kind of adjusting how I'm viewing that rubric as like maybe I'm getting harder or maybe I'm getting easier because it is so subjective. And so that's why it's really important when a kid comes and says, "Hey, I don't agree with this grade." You have to be like, "Well, okay, yeah, let's take a look at it because I could have made a mistake, definitely."
Right. But it's hard because the way I really want to be is like, this is the grade I gave you. What are you going to do about it? But then inside of me, I have to, and to be honest, I do that sometimes. And sometimes it's appropriate in the way that education is, because at the end of the day, it really is subjective. You can break it down into a rubric, very, very small detail, and you are still making a subjective decision based on your
Mhm.
expertise or background as the teacher, as the instructor. And that's what I tell the students, but it does help them to have that breakdown. So when I'm
Right.
thinking about what our role is as a Christian, someone who's trying to be the light of Christ in the world, one of the greatest opportunities that both you and I have is our role as teachers in high school and at the university. And it's challenging because a lot of the time I think about me and what my needs are, and I have to overcome that consistently to serve the students like I really do want to in my heart and in the way Jesus is calling me in my spirit. So that's a challenge. But what are some other things like just in education in general that are really challenging for us as Christians who are trying to be resilient and serve as God has called us?
I would say discipline in the
Mm,
classroom, like how you approach the way you have problems. Kids getting their phones out when you're trying to talk, or talking, or not progressing on assignments. That is something that I feel like I struggle with all the time because I want to be loving and kind and caring. But also, I want to have structure in my classroom. I want my kids to know you have expectations and you need to meet those expectations. And it can be hard at times not to get really aggravated with things. And it's something that I feel like I never had down perfectly because it's just a continuous, ongoing, everyday thing that you deal with in and day out the entire time.
Yeah, so I think of one of the situations that comes up commonly in my classes, and I tend to have a really good time. I have a great rapport with my students. I'm rigorous in the content material, but we also have a lot of fun. Still, in high school or college settings, there's the student or students that sit in the back and they're on their phone or laptop and they're not invested. They really don't care at all. And that's difficult for me because I come and I bring my energy every single day. And I would like and I ask that the students do the same. And so one of the things that I learned teaching at the secondary level was how to individualize instruction. And that really helped me. And it sounds ridiculous because you've got however many students that you got in your classroom and then how many students you got all day long. But it helps me to understand that each person learns differently. And this is not like a lesson on being a teacher or anything. We're talking about what it means to be a resilient Christian living out one of our callings, one of our jobs, which is in academia to teach. But then we come up against these students who don't really care at all. And I'll use different strategies with them. Like, for example, 2 semesters ago, I had a student. He was super, super smart. He was really bright. And he would just sit in the back working on his engineering projects on his laptop. But when he got up to speak, man, he was groundbreaking. He was awesome. So I actually spoke with him individually and I said, hey, I'm not gonna say his name, but hey, guy is what I'll use right now. Like, hey, guy, I was respectful. I used his name, but I said, hey, man, I know that you're super busy, and when you get up to speak, you are amazing. So let's do, if you're up for it, maybe we could do 2 things. Like, number one, how about you show up to class whenever you feel like it? Because I don't want to waste your time because you're an expert. You already know things. You're amazing. Okay. On top of that, though, there's a lot of people that could use your help and how you negotiate building a speech and working in groups and all that. They could really benefit. So when you're not super overloaded and busy, how would you feel about working in small groups with some people that I really could use your help? And he was open to that. And in fact, because of that, he came and was invested a lot more in the class and showed up with purpose instead of sitting in the back feeling like he was above everything. And the honest truth is, he was masterful. He was very, very good at public speaking. Actually, we were doing technical, professional speaking communication, but that was just like one way. Could I do that with every student? No way. Absolutely not. That was like a one time, this guy is masterful. He's in a unique experience. But that's how I used his individualized piece of who he was to help our whole classroom and him. And it made him feel valued because I didn't treat him like every other student. Because, I could go in there and be like, hey, man, you're not paying attention. Why don't you just get out? Or you're not paying attention. Your participation grade is going to go way down. But in my desire to search and find ways that I can honor the Lord through serving the people around me, including most definitely the students, one of the ways I do is figure out individually, how can I serve this student right here in this class?
Right. And I feel like that's something I have to work on constantly because my automatic go-to is to want to be punitive, to punish you.
That's right.
You're not doing this. I want to take your grade down. And I think it comes from me wanting to show my authority and being in control. And so I really do have to, in those situations, have a mental conversation with myself of that's not going to get you anywhere. Punishing a kid and making it feel punitive, you've lost the relationship. So how are you going to address this problem, but do it in a way that you're not just like slapping down punishment? And that's something every single day I have to work through all the time because it's my automatic go-to. And I have to really, that's not what Christ was. Christ was not out to punish. And when I do that, I'm not showing Christ to my kids. I'm not showing the compassion that he had for people. And it's not like I can just walk into my room and be like, I'm going to be compassionate today and I'm all good. I mean, it's a daily choice
It is.
by choice thing that I have to do.
It's hard because commonly my classes are at 8 or 9 o'clock in the morning, and I get up early and I appreciate it. But a lot of the times I'm still working through my own issues. And you get into the classroom, and there's days I don't want to be there, right? I'd rather be at home in my own house with my dogs and just chilling, doing whatever, because I don't feel like teaching and giving my best fight. And that's when it's really hard, especially when you have a student walk in and they've got an attitude, or they haven't turned their grades in, or they're questioning you about their grades. And that's the time you have to really get up and think, okay, how am I going to respond to this? Because the default response that I see by a lot of instructors, professors, teachers is, you don't tell me what to do. I'm in charge. And the truth is that is correct. That's the way it is. It's kind of like the authority system of making sure that the wheels don't spin out of control. Like, you have to have some of that authority to maintain some control. And we're adults, and part of our job is to train or help students be prepared for the real workforce. But at the same time, I really do want to live out the light of Christ. And one of my favorite places to be is in the classroom. So it's a decision that I make daily, and I know you do too, to set myself aside in order to be that humble, kind patient, rigorous and disciplined, and the adult authority figure, but also a person who listens first and understands where the students are coming from. Because I think a lot of that is missing throughout academia these days.
I agree, and I feel like part of it is because it is getting more challenging both at the high school or the public school and the, college level with all the expectations and the things that you need to bring, and so I feel like you start to feel a little bit overwhelmed
Yeah.
and, can lead to frustration, but then you cannot bring that into the classroom and do the best that you can do. So you've got to find a way to balance out, dealing with your own emotions and your own feelings and still providing these kids with the best person you can possibly be, and that's a difficult balancing act at times.
Okay, let's back it up. So we were
Okay.
married, we were younger in our 20s, early 30s. We're like really old now because we're both 48. So we've been teaching for a long time. But back in the day, in the beginning, you had been a teacher when we first got married. While we were married for 15 years, you were a teacher. And commonly, you would come home exhausted because you gave everything to these students and you're like whiny, tired. And I'm like, what is your problem? Just do your job. You're like, oh, is this hard? You don't understand. I'm like, what are you talking about? Just do your job.
Well, and
Because
I
I
was elementary at that point, so it seemed like it was, you just play with kids all day, like, how hard can this be? So, yeah.
Oh yeah, I would even joke around saying like, what, you just do some watercoloring and then take a recess and nap time. How hard is that? But I did not have the ability to understand because I had been working in the fire department as a paramedic firefighter to where we respond to an event and then for all intents and purposes, we were done. We walk away. Yes, we had some paperwork to do to reflect on it, but then we were done. Or I'd be working in television where we'd create a commercial or whatever, or a show, and then we'd be done and we'd walk away. So when I would hear you and the struggles you were having as an educator in academia, I did not understand. Okay. And then after 15 years of marriage, I became a teacher myself. And it was like day one, I understood just how difficult it is. And yes, it is the kids. They're difficult, but they're also awesome and wonderful. But it's not just the kids, it's everything else that piles on you. So what are some things that you're having to deal with
Yes.
there?
So it's like, you go in and when you're in the classroom, you need to give your kids your full attention. Especially, I have the greatest respect for elementary teachers and what they do, because they are planning multiple subjects. They are doing because they are parenting and these are babies, who they're bringing up. So I have so much respect for what elementary teachers do. But when you're in that classroom, you have to give those kids 100% while you're in there, but then you've also got paperwork you've got to do for your special ed kids. You've got lesson planning you need to do. You've got grading you need to do. You've got phone calls you have to make. You've got meetings you're supposed to be in. And you get one conference period and it's typically like 45 minutes in the day. And it's not like you can do those, especially with those elementary teachers. You can't do that during class time because they take all your time. And then you've got to figure out how to balance all the other things that are being put on your plate that you basically have 45 minutes a day to do. And and it's exhausting.
Okay,
And
so let's switch gears here because we're feeling like,
yeah.
okay, elementary school, now you're teaching high school. Kind of feels like
Yes.
we're whining here because people who
Yeah.
are teachers, they don't get it.
Yeah.
So like,
Right.
what's the deal? What makes it so hard?
I think what adds that extra level is that emotional commitment that you put into it, wanting to be the very best you can be for your kids. You want to make a difference. You want to change their lives and see them be successful. And a lot of the things that you're working on, in addition to being in the classroom, that's the whole point of those things. The meetings and the grading and all that is to help them achieve that. But I do think that emotional commitment is what adds an extra layer of making it hard. It's not just getting your job done, it's getting it done for this other person to be successful and then worrying that you're doing the best you can do.
Ah, so now I see. I think the key to being a teacher without going crazy is not to care and just sit back and
Yeah.
relax. Because if you exhaust yourself with that emotional investment, then you're going to go over, the balance is going to be lost and you've done too much. How do you feel about
Yes.
that strategy?
I think that would be a terrible thing to not care.
Really,
You
really.
can't well, I do think there are some things, not the kids, obviously, but there are some things that you have to say, It's not gonna get done. I
Right.
can't do it," which again is difficult because you wanna be everything you can be, but, um, I don't know who told me this, it may have been you. It's like I think it was. It's like you're juggling all
Yeah.
these balls,
Yeah.
and when one of them falls, you just hope nobody notices the one that you dropped because 'cause you're just still juggling what you got left.
That's
So,
right.
I think that's great.
No, I feel like when I moved from the normal sector into education, I felt like I was going to be fired because I was not able to get everything done. And if you're a teacher or educator, you understand. If you're not, it's just hard. You just don't get it because I was that person for 15 years. Like you just don't understand. Like what? Just do your job. You don't understand how the email box is always overflowing and full. You can't get it done. That's just one aspect, but like you got to deal with the special ed kids, the 504 kids. You got emails, parent meetings, trainings, bus duties, other duties, committee meetings, all your responsibilities that add up to everything you got to get done that has nothing to do with being in your classroom and actually teaching a lesson. Like you haven't even prepared your lessons yet. You haven't even graded those 200 essays you got to grade. It's just completely overwhelming and it drives you bonkers because I know for me, I felt like I was going to be fired because I wasn't doing a good job of getting all of it done. So when we think about how can we as Christians serve in academia, I know one of the lessons I had to learn was, okay, as we're juggling all these responsibilities, I've got to let a few of them drop so that I can get the main ones, which is the kids. And I see a lot of people struggling with that at both levels, university and high school, to where they're very concerned and they're freaking out about some of these details that really, I mean, of course they're important. They're a part of being a great educator. But some of these details people will get lost in over here. And it's like sometimes we've got to let those go for a moment so that we can step back, relax, and be able to emotionally invest in the students because at the end of the day, that's what the most important thing is. It's like the goal is care for our students. The second one is how can we get them to these markers academically where they need to get? Other than that, everything else is the little details that it doesn't feel good because some of them you got to let go a little bit, but then you kind of step back and say, okay, I'm going to do my very best on these up here, the students and the goals we're trying to get them toward. And everything else is just details that I'll do my best
Right.
on, but I got to let some of it go.
And I think that's hard for us to let things go because you wanna be able to do everything perfectly. I mean, that's a common trait of teachers. You wanna be that perfect person who can get it all done and balance everything. And it is hard when you have to finally say, "Okay, I gotta focus on what's most important." But I think that that's what's really good for you personally as a teacher so that you're bringing your kids the best you can bring, because if you're not in a good spot, it's much, much harder to put them and help them be in a good spot. So it is something that you just have to learn to do.
So at the end of the day, as people who are trying to be resilient, taking it all as it comes to us, and we want to overcome adversity to be the light of Christ, as instructors or teachers in academia, what do we do? What's our number one mission? How do we live from day to day and make sure we're getting done what God has called us to do?
I think you show grace.
Mm.
Grace for your students, grace for your parents and admin, and most importantly, grace for yourself. Give yourself opportunities to not be perfect and say, it's fine. I'm doing the best I can. I'm focusing on these kids and I'm giving them the best I can give them. And I think that's how you bring Christ to your classroom. You live a life of grace.
Now, you for a moment there kind of looked like you were going to cry. Why? Tell
I
us
know.
about that emotion.
You're now you are gonna make me cry because you're making me talk about it. It's hard.
What's hard?
It's hard. You love these kids.
Yeah,
You love these kids,
yeah,
and you wanna do everything you possibly can, and sometimes it just feels, impossible.
yeah. Well, see, you're a really good person and you truly do care. That's why it's hard for you. I'm not a good person. I just don't care, you know?
That's not
So
true,
I can let
because
it go.
That's not true because you are the reason I am the teacher I am today because you taught me how to be. This is your fault. You did this to me.
Yeah. Okay. So we can see visually and audibly, we can look and see how much you truly do care. And the truth is, I feel the same way. Um, but as we come to a close on our show about being resilient Christians in the real world, day to day, we're talking about academia. What is your one goal for the year? Of course, you care about the kids, you want to show them that, but like, what's one of the things you're trying to accomplish this year?
This year, I want my kids to feel successful. I want them to feel loved. I want them to feel important. I want them to feel empowered.
I see. Okay, so for me, I think I do a really good job of creating that environment in the classroom already. I feel like I show vulnerability and the kids get excited and they show up and they're invested and they grow and we hit the markers of different classes that I'm in. I think for me, my goal is to see if I can start to promote what we're doing in the classroom a little bit better through some video demonstrations of what we do and how we create that environment. And then to go for like a university level award as an instructor. Like it's important because I'm about to step out and be applying for jobs as a professor. So I do need this. So in one sense, it's like, hey, we got to focus on me. And the truth is, no, we've got to showcase the great things that we're doing in the classroom already because I did win an award last semester for my year of teaching at A&M, but that was at like the department level. So now I want to try to take that to the next like university level so that it's more known about what I'm doing. And I always hesitate about that because it's like, hey, let's put the spotlight on me and brag about it and all that. But no, that's a step of preparing yourself to showcase for jobs. I have a good buddy. His name is Bill Visco. He's a professor at the University of Akron. We were both teachers at Coppell High School in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. And he's the one who really showed me, among other things, how to start promoting the great things that we're doing in our classrooms. Because number one, it helps us be prepared to get these new jobs and positions. But number two, it really showcases the phenomenal things that Coppell High School or Coppell ISD has done for us to grow us as teachers, and now A&M. So it reflects back on A&M and the students for us to be able to showcase what we're doing in the classroom. So my goal is, among the idea, of course, of bringing it for my students is to see if I can get a university level award because that's going to help me as I apply for other jobs and reflect great back on my department. So there it is. There's our show for the day, focused on academia and being resilient as Christians. And the closing line that Laura's going to give us is going to be really unique and wonderful and fantastic. And action.
But this is my close.
She just, if you can't see her because we are on a podcast platform with just audio, she just sits there and smiles. So I will simply say thanks for tuning in and we'll chat with you next time.